Good morning. I'd like to introduce to you some of the ideas behind Deeper City, collective intelligence from smart to wise. And I will attempt to do this in just over 10 minutes. This is always a challenge, and I'm a bit notorious for going over, but we'll have a go. First of all, the objectives and the clients. As you can see, some beat up place not far from here in Manchester. And how does this pan out? Well, these are the chapters of the book: prologue, prospects, toolkits. Then we get to the substance, the cities, the economies, the ecologies, technologies and politicals. And then we get to some deeper thinking, the insights, and what does this mean for local and global? And then finally, we fly off on a sort of tangent and end up with a postscript for the pandemic. Everyone's heard about this pandemic. Even these people who are busy inventing the future in southern India right now. So, well, here's the kind of situation. We've got a pandemic which is creating deeper multipliers all over the place. Climate change, politics, migration, finance, inequality. And here's the response. The people say, okay, we're supposed to draw some maps here. Where do we start? So we're all beginners in this. This book is simply a beginning. And we begin with some deeper questions. Here's me, coming from when I was younger in the 1980s, everyone arguing. And then this word sustainability kind of emerged out of the ether. I set up a Sustainable City Region programme in Manchester. It seemed very meaningful. And we set up a laboratory, a research centre. But all the time we are feeling bits of this elephant, as you can see. And gradually, over some years, we began to explore not only the things, but the thinking. So this book is a kind of map of that journey. Not to say that everything is solved. How do you draw thinking? How do you create 3 bullet points out of 10 years of research? But the main question is simple and huge. Can humans live in peace and prosperity on one planet? Technically, seems quite far-fetched. Everyone wants to live like the rich. So we construct a hypothesis, the one planet, or Athena hypothesis, maybe, depending. So this book is a kind of cartoon guide to that question. Well, how does it work? Well, we say, okay, we have 3 different kinds of thinking: clever thinking, smart thinking, wiser thinking. Each one creates a different kind of world, everything from dictatorship to a networked democracy, where everyone has prosperity and peace and justice. And then we track, what does this mean for cities, and economies and so on, in the clever variety, the smart variety, and the wiser variety. So this is a never-ending list of diagrams and cartoons, which you'll see a small cross-section of in the next few minutes. Chapter 3 is about the toolkits. How do we do this? Well, here's the kind of route diagram, and we say, okay, sooner or later we have to get people to talk to each other. There is no one blueprint for how this works, but we've tried it many, many different ways. And once they are talking to each other in some way or other, not always in the same room at the same time, particularly now, everything goes online, we say, okay, what is the problem? What exactly can we talk about today, or tomorrow, or next year, or whatever? So that is never a simple question for any interesting problem. We use visual methods, as you can see. I'm very keen on this, as you will notice. And we have specialist resources, and we look in the future, the trends, dynamics, alternative scenarios. And then the core of the whole thing, we say, okay, third step, we look for synergies. We explore new visions, collaborations, value loops and circles, synergies and ideas. And then finally, we get to the strategy and say, okay, great ideas, what do we do? How do we take this back into reality? Maybe we go around the cycle again, or maybe that's done. And of course, we have to ask, when we're setting all this up, who are these people? Why are they here? When is the lunch or the beer afterwards? How much time and money does the whole thing cost? Practical questions. And then the bigger questions, what kind of question, what kind of problem are we trying to answer? Is it functional fixing of a direct problem? Is it more about innovation and competition? Is it more about transformation? So the three different varieties of this toolkit for three different types of problems. Now, in reality, the different problems are all mixed up. That's half of the fun. And we can spend, hours, days, or even years trying to get to the bottom of what really are we wanting to do here. We usually find people really want to transform, but it's really not easy, not simple. So we have to talk it through. This is what this is all about. So talking about cities for a minute, deeper cities or so on. So again, there's a kind of opposition between what might be clever or smart. This comes from my own experience as an urban activist, trying to face down the bulldozers, taking down viable communities for profit, in a word. And then we say, what's the alternative? Well, we have to ask the people. It takes time. We design things that are at a human scale, not always just to make profit. And this means a whole sort of turnaround, not only in what comes out of this, but in how we do it. So this is then a clue to a clever or smart kind of design and planning process. And here we see the people around that table again from the previous two slides. And this is a typical situation. This is how I started the whole thing in about 1991, actually. Drawing pictures of round tables in the community where everything was really messed up. And as you can see, things are kind of all in bits. Finance wants a fast buck. Community is out of the loop. There's power structures all over the place. And then on the right-hand side, we have a wiser version. How does that work? We have incentives for shared value. We have people with longer horizons. The community is in the loop. The citizens are mobilised. Firms maybe use local skills rather than imported labour, and so on and so on. So then there are pathways. You see each of the colours around the table can then be translated into a pathway. Livelihood pathways, knowledge pathways, institutional pathways. And each pathway has its own kind of logic, its own kind of, opportunities and gaps and barriers, but at least we have some idea what we are trying to look for in this complex situation where really we are not just looking for a winner-takes-all answer. That is already what we know how to do. We're looking for a situation where everybody is a winner. This takes collaboration, cooperation, discussion, and we can now begin to draw maps of all this. I find this very exciting. So then we track that kind of approach into other areas. Here's one from the economy chapter called Circularnomics, meaning how do we do the circular economy? Well, not only a matter of materials going around and around, but it's money that goes around and around, and the political will and trust and commitment that also goes around and around, and not to mention the ecosystems themselves. So this is, again, a kind of cartoon version of some quite, evolved and advanced thing, but this is what we're really aiming for, not just, get the bottles recycled. Then we say, okay, let's enlarge that to a picture of business as a whole. And this is fundamentally important to say, okay, how does business do this? On the left, you see, a supply chain with a business model canvas. On the right, you see a value constellation. Many things are related to many other things. And you see a different kind of business model canvas, or we might say socio-eco enterprise canvas. People are in the loop. Suppliers, all the way to consumers and the community, are involved. The finance is not simply some rip-off fast buck thing. The finance is within that system and recirculated and reinvested. So, and not to mention the materials. So that's a kind of very quick cartoon version of something which then is of fundamental importance to how things can work. One example, food from chapter 6. Well, we all know big bad agri-business, when we see it, creates junk food, it destroys the rainforest, it poisons the rivers, to mention a few things. And at the local level, we see people, getting obese, suffering from diabetes. This is not a great way to organise a food system. So we then say, okay, how might this be different? Let's maybe start at the local level and then track up back to the global level, where we address the corporates, the investment patterns, the trade rules, the land use management, and so on and so on. All of these things somehow maybe can start to fit together. It's not an easy ask, but what's the alternative? Well, then we delve into the fascinating world of digital technology, and here we have the difference between hailing a taxi at random on the street in the pre-digital world. In the centre we have the Uber and many similar kinds of things. And we all know, Uber creates a lot of problems. It does bus transport out of business, extracts the profit, exploits the workers, a few other things. What would be a synergistic alternative? Well, we have to look for ways to recirculate, to internalise, and to reinvest, and so on. Same goes for Airbnb and all that kind of thing. And we can then generalise to say, okay, if we are looking to turn our smart digital technology services into something wiser, we have to re-socialise. We have to get into the conceptual design of how the whole thing works. Not only the technology, but the technology within society. Well, talking of society, long story. But here's one very, very simple kind of vignette. And we say, okay, what's the difference between a dictatorship? And there's a few of these around the world, unfortunately, not happy places usually. Have to be careful not to generalise. Here's a kind of model of the UK for one, and many other countries which are apparently democracies. There is a sort of Mandarin elite, there is an inbuilt class structure. In the UK, things look sort of quite, orderly and polite, basically because the rich grabbed the land off the poor over 200 years ago in the enclosures, and, shunted the poor to work in factories. In other countries, the land grabbing is going on right now, so things are not nice. There's conflict and pain all over. So again, what's the alternative? How do you get around this most basic feature of all human societies, inequality and hierarchy? So there is no simple answer, but we can say, let's look for ways in which there is recirculation, not all on the same material plane, but through culture, through psychology, through political trust, through access to hidden resources, not just, the material nirvana of the billionaires and so on. So the image here is a tree of life. And, well, I could discourse on this for a good hour, but I'll just leave you with that image. Talking of trees and water, well, then we can talk about resilience. This is one of a set of system conditions in chapter 9. And resilience here, well, you can see this is a very unresilient place. The flood comes down from the hills. The farmers have dug up the drainage for a fast buck with chemical fertilizers. The trees are all down. The houses are in the wrong place and time, and as you can see, the government is all in silos. There's a little drawing of the silos, not talking to each other. So then, is there an alternative? Well, yeah, we take the same river, the same climate change, maybe, and we talk about integrated catchment management. We talk about thinking about causes and effects, all as part of our bigger picture. We start to locate houses in the right place. We start particularly to connect together the different arms of government and public services. to get all arms of government to talk to each other. Well, that sounds simple. What could possibly go wrong with that? From personal experience, everything. So you have to keep trying. What alternative is there? Well, maybe dictatorship would be, quicker, but then too many people get locked up and shot, as in the previous slide. So there. Talking of global, well, here's a picture of the global balance, and again, massive difference between rich and poor. Here's the little vignette of the northern tourist sitting on the southern beaches, served by servants on $1 a day, living in slums. There used to be villagers, on subsistence. Now they're in the slums and working in the factories, making stuff for the rich to throw away in their enclaves. I mean, I'm simplifying, obviously, but, this is kind of how it is. And then we say, is there an alternative? Could we use these ideas for a better kind of more synergistic balance? Well, this is a huge, huge project. It could take, a whole university of people to study it, and many, many are, in Manchester and many other places. So here's a kind of cartoon version. And we look for all these great ideas, and particularly we look for ways in which they can fit together, because then the synergy starts to work better. Rather than a pile of separate ideas, we have a program. So more could be said another time. Finally, we have our collaboratorium, and say, okay, if we put all these ideas together, how are we going to do this? Where do we start? Now, this is a picture of basically a laboratory for collaboration, a collaboratorium. If scaled up, it starts to resemble a multi-university, multiversity, where everyone involved can learn from everyone, not just clever academics and top-ranking policy elites, but everyone. And this is actually my dream. So this is a kind of very simplistic cartoon version of what is, again, a huge agenda to take forward. And we're now creating projects to actually do this, step by step as we go forward. So, well, there is a storyline which then takes all this stuff. This picture finds itself on the cover of the book, actually. And this is a fictional, we think, mind lab. And they have constructed the world's largest Thinkonomics synergizer. If you ever heard of the Hadron Collider, this is, even better. So, and this models worlds and cities, complex systems, and looks at the difference between smart and wise. When does it go into commercial production? I'd like to know. So, and then finally we get back to the pandemic, and sorry to skip through this, but we have to then say, oh, okay, there are alternative futures. The pandemic might be solved, great. It might not be solved, oh dear. If that is the case, what can we do? And a lot of people want a return to business as usual. Let's all go shopping. Some people want, well, actually a lot of people also want some kind of transition. This may be just great in our old neighbourhood. We may have to adapt to new conditions, as you can see. So that's where we're at. So thank you very much. This is my stuff over the years, and this is the book. I can recommend it. It's got some nice cartoons. It's quite practical. It has about 1,000 citations, so it's got a lot of science in it too. And happy reading, and please join the collaboratorium on the website and sign up for the launch events, and look forward to seeing you. Thank you very much.